Ever feel like cybersecurity is this constantly moving target? You're always trying to catch up to the latest threats.
Or absolutely. It's a field that just never stands still.
Well, today we're going deep, really deep into some real-world cybersecurity scenarios to give you a leg up, a bit of a head start.
Yeah, a bit of an edge.
We've got this set of practice questions and answers, actually, from the CompTIA Cybersecurity Analyst exam, the CySA plus FREEM.
Oh, nice. Yeah, that's a good one.
So we're talking real-deal scenarios that security pros might encounter.
Mm-hmm.
And what we're going to do is break these down, really pull out the core concepts and how they play out in practice.
I like it. Sort of like a cheat sheet to understanding some of the key aspects of the field.
Exactly. So first scenario, picture this. A security analyst sees a wave of failed login attempts hitting different user accounts all at once. And these login attempts, they're coming from all over the place, different IP addresses.
Okay, yeah, sounds familiar.
And it all happens in a really short burst. What's going on here?
So what you're describing is a classic example of what we call credential stuffing.
Credential stuffing, okay. But what's really going on under the hood there?
Well, it all boils down to, human nature. People tend to reuse passwords across different accounts.
Yeah, guilty as charged. I mean, who can remember a million different passwords?
Exactly. And attackers know this. So what they do is they gather these huge lists of leaked usernames and passwords from past data breaches. Then they use these automated tools, often botnets, to just hammer away at a whole bunch of online services.
So they're not trying to crack a specific password, they're just trying a bunch of stolen ones to see if they work.
Exactly. It's a numbers game. And because it's so automated and distributed, it's really hard to block using traditional security measures.
That's kind of scary. So what you're saying is that one data breach, maybe on a site with weaker security, could have ripple effects across tons of platforms.
Exactly. And that's why, it's so important to use unique, strong passwords for every single account.
Okay, message received. Let's switch gears a bit and talk about vulnerability management. This is a core concept in security, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely foundational.
So the question is, when you're setting up a vulnerability management program, what's the very first step?
The very first step is always conducting a vulnerability scan. It's the most crucial thing.
Why is that so important right off the bat?
Well, you can't really secure something if you don't know where the weaknesses are, right? Think of it like, checking all the doors and windows of your house to make sure they're locked.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense.
A vulnerability scan does the same thing for your IT systems. It uses these special tools to automatically check your servers, workstations, network devices, you name it.
Against what, though?
Against a massive database of known security weaknesses. They're constantly being updated, things like the CVE database. These scans look for all sorts of potential flaws. Outdated software, missing security patches, insecure configurations, stuff like that.
And the point of this is to find those weak spots before the bad guys do. Right.
Precisely. You've got to know what you're dealing with before you can start fixing it. It's all about understanding your attack surface and then figuring out how to manage those risks.
Okay, let's say a security analyst wants to keep an eye on network traffic in real time, just in case something fishy is going on, like someone scanning ports on a server or trying to exploit a software vulnerability.
Right. In those cases, the tool of choice is an intrusion detection system, or IDS.
IDS. So what does an IDS actually do?
You can think of it as like a silent watchdog, constantly observing the network. It's always monitoring traffic, looking for any suspicious patterns.
Suspicious, like what?
Well, for example, it can detect if someone's trying to scan all the ports on a server, which is often the first step attackers take to find a way in. Or it can detect attempts to exploit known vulnerabilities in software, like using a specific attack that's already been documented.
So it's like an alarm system that goes off when it senses something's wrong.
That's a good analogy. When the IDS detects something suspicious, it generates an alert. That gives the security team a heads up so they can investigate and take action.
Okay, but the question specifically says that an IDS doesn't block traffic. Why is that an important distinction?
Right. See, an IDS is primarily about monitoring and alerting, not about blocking. And that's a deliberate choice.
I see. So it's less likely to disrupt normal network activity.
Exactly. Security teams can look at the alerts and decide what needs to be done. They have more control. But, of course, it also means that potentially harmful traffic might still get through, so they need to act quickly.
Okay. Next scenario.
Yeah.
We've got a security incident. We're right in the middle of the containment phase. What's the absolute first thing the security team should do?
Without a doubt, isolate the affected systems. Get them off the network, immediately.
Why that's so crucial?
Think of it like a disease outbreak. You want to quarantine the infected individuals to stop the spread, right?
Right, contain it.
Exactly. In cybersecurity, a compromised system is like that infected person. It can be used to launch further attacks within your network. By isolating it, you're cutting off the attacker's access and preventing them from causing more damage.
So it's all about damage control, preventing the situation from spiraling out of control.
Exactly. You need to contain the breach before you can even start thinking about investigating what happened, recovering data, or fixing the problem.
Okay, let's move on to something a little different. Data privacy. We all see those cookie consent pop-ups online, right?
Oh yeah, those are everywhere.
But there's a bigger picture here. The question asks which framework focuses specifically on data privacy principles. The answer: the General Data Protection Regulation, or GDPR.
Right, GDPR. It's a big deal.
But what is it exactly? And why is it so important?
So GDPR is this really comprehensive legal framework from the European Union, and it's basically changed how organizations all over the world handle personal data. The whole point is to give individuals more control over their information.
So it's not just about protecting data from hackers, it's also about how companies use and share our information.
Exactly. It sets strict rules about collecting, storing, processing, and sharing personal data. And it applies to any organization that deals with data from EU residents, even if the company itself isn't in the EU.
Wow, so it has a global impact.
Yeah, definitely. Companies have to be transparent about how they use our data. They need to get our consent. They have to have strong security measures in place, and they have to notify us if there's a data breach. And we have rights, too. We can access our data, correct it, even delete it.
That's pretty powerful.
Yeah, and it's got teeth, too. Companies can face massive fines if they don't comply.
Okay, back to the technical side. Imagine malware trying to communicate with its command and control server. That's how attackers control it, right?
Right, it's like a lifeline for the malware.
But to make it harder to detect, attackers use something called domain generation algorithms, or DGAs.
Yeah, DGAs. They're sneaky.
So the question is, what kind of indicators are most effective at detecting this DGA activity? And the answer is behavioral indicators.
Right, behavioral indicators. It's all about spotting unusual patterns.
Okay, so how does that work?
Well, DGAs basically allow malware to create a bunch of random-looking domain names, just tons of them, and the attacker controls a few of these domains. So if one gets blocked, the malware just tries another one from the list.
So it's constantly changing its communication channels.
Yeah, making it really hard to block using traditional methods that rely on blacklisting known bad domains.
So how do behavioral indicators help?
Well, instead of looking for specific domain names, you look for unusual activity, like a device making a ton of DNS requests for weird domains that don't make sense or that only exist for a short time.
So it's about spotting the pattern, not the specific domain.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's why behavioral analysis is so effective against DGAs. It can catch new, never-before-seen malware because it's looking for the behavior, not the specific signature.
Okay, let's talk about SIEM systems. Security information and event management. These are pretty powerful tools, right?
Oh, yeah. SIEMs are like the central nervous system of a security operation. They bring together all sorts of security data.
So imagine configuring a SIEM to send an alert if there's a sudden spike in failed login attempts within a certain time period.
Right, like a surge of failed logins. That
Right.
could be a sign of something bad happening.
Exactly. So what kind of detection method is this? The answer is statistical anomaly-based detection.
Right. It's all about looking for deviations from what's normal.
So how does that work?
Well, the SIEM system basically learns what's typical behavior for a particular event, like how many failed login attempts usually happen in a given time frame, and then it continuously monitors the activity.
So it creates a baseline of normal activity.
Exactly. And if the activity deviates significantly from that baseline, if there's a sudden spike, the SIEM triggers an alert.
So it's not looking for specific failed usernames or passwords. It's looking for an unusual volume of failures.
Exactly. This method is really effective at catching things like brute force attacks, where someone's trying a bunch of password combinations, or even insider threats, where a user might be doing something suspicious.
Because malicious activity often looks different from normal activity.
Right. And the beauty of anomaly detection is that it can catch things that haven't been seen before, things that don't match any known attack patterns.
Okay, next up, digital forensics. This is all about investigating security incidents and finding evidence,
Or
right?
exactly, it's like detective work in the digital realm.
And one of the most important things in forensics is preserving the integrity of evidence. So what's the most crucial step to ensure that evidence holds up in court or in an internal investigation?
The answer is documenting the chain of custody meticulously.
Chain to custody, what is that?
It's basically a detailed record of everyone who has handled a piece of evidence. It tracks who had it, when they had it, where it was stored, and what, if anything, they did with it. Every single step from the moment the evidence is collected to the moment it's presented.
So it's like a complete audit trail.
Precisely. And the reason it's so crucial is that it guarantees the authenticity of the evidence. If there's a gap in the chain of custody, if there's no record of what happened to the evidence at a certain point in time, the opposing side can argue that it might have been tampered with or compromised.
So it's all about proving that the evidence hasn't been messed with.
Exactly. A solid chain of custody is absolutely essential for evidence to be admissible in court.
Okay, final question. Let's talk about vulnerabilities and exploits. These terms get thrown around a lot, but what's the difference?
That's a great question. It's a fundamental distinction. So a vulnerability is basically a weakness in a system, a flaw that could potentially be exploited. It could be a software bug, a misconfiguration, a design flaw, anything that creates a security hole.
So it's like a crack in the wall.
Exactly. And an exploit is the method, the tool, or the code that an attacker uses to take advantage of that vulnerability. It's what they use to actually get through the crack and into the system.
So the vulnerability is the weakness, and the exploit is how the attacker uses that weakness.
Precisely. And it's important to understand that a system might have tons of vulnerabilities, but those vulnerabilities only pose a real threat if there's a known exploit that can target them.
So identifying vulnerabilities is like finding potential problems,
Yeah.
and understanding exploits is about knowing how those problems could be used against you.
Exactly. And for organizations, it's a constant balancing act. They need to prioritize fixing vulnerabilities, but they also need to be aware of the exploits that are out there in the wild so they can focus on the most critical threats.
Okay, last question. Let's talk about leadership in cybersecurity. Specifically, the CISO, the Chief Information Security Officer.
The CISO, they've got a tough job.
So imagine a company doing its annual review of its information security policies. Who's ultimately responsible for approving any changes to those policies?
That would be the CISO. They're the top dog when it comes to cybersecurity.
So what exactly does the CISO do in this context?
Well, they're responsible for the entire cybersecurity strategy of the organization. That includes the technical stuff, but also the policies and procedures that govern how security is managed. They oversee the development, implementation, and maintenance of all those policies.
So they're the ones who set the rules.
Exactly. And while they might delegate some of the work to other teams, the CISO has the final say on what those policies look like. They need to make sure the policies align with the company's goals, that they comply with any relevant laws and regulations, and that they're effective against current threats.
So they're basically the gatekeeper, making sure the company's security policies are up to snuff.
Precisely. It's a huge responsibility, but it's essential to have that leadership and accountability at the top.
Well, thanks for joining us for this deep dive. We'll be back soon with more explorations into the world of digital security.
Always a pleasure. Stay safe out there.
Until next time.